I never thought my entire world could crumble from a single kiss. But there I was, standing frozen like a statue outside the main library of Columbia University, watching Hunter's lips locked with another man's. My boyfriend of 2 years. My alpha boyfriend. The man whose scent had once made my omega instinct sing with contentment. Was making out with a complete stranger right in front of everyone, as if our relationship meant absolutely nothing. The autumn rain had just begun to fall, a cold New York drizzle that mirrored the sudden chill seeping into my bones. Passing students hurried by with umbrellas, a few casting curious or pitying glances in our direction. I could not move. My chest felt like it was caving in a literal, physical pain that made it hard to breathe. My omega instincts were screaming, betrayal, rejection, loss. But I could not even whimper. I just stood there, my senses spiking with distress so strongly that I could smell it myself, sour, sharp, wrong. The worst part was not just seeing him with someone else. It was the moment Hunter's eyes met mine over the stranger's shoulder. There was not an ounce of guilt in them, not even a flicker of remorse. "Elliot," he called out to me, breaking the kiss as if nothing had happened. His voice carried that casual, arrogant tone he used when discussing weekend plans. The other guy, whoever he was, immediately stepped back, clearly uncomfortable with the sudden appearance of what was obviously Hunter's boyfriend. He mumbled something about having to get to class and practically fled the scene, pulling his jacket over his head. Hunter approached me with that same stupid, confident smirk I had been looking at for 2 years. The one that used to make my heart skip. The one that now made my stomach turn. His dark hair was slightly messy from his impromptu makeup session, and he had the audacity to look completely unbothered by what had just transpired. His alpha pheromones were still elevated, spilling into the damp air. It was not the warm, protective scent I remembered, but something harsher, something that smelled like cheap whiskey and someone else's sweat. It was pungent, aggressive, and suffocating. A wave of nausea hit me. "Look, I can explain," he started, reaching out as if to touch my arm. "Explain what?" My voice came out as barely a whisper, but I could hear the tremor in it. I forced myself to stand taller, ignoring the rain plastering my hair to my forehead. "Explain why you have been ignoring me for the past month. Or explain why you told me you were too busy with your internship to hang out." The mask slipped from Hunter's face. His expression shifted from fake innocence to something harder, more honest, and infinitely crueler. That artificial sweetness he had been wearing disappeared completely, replaced by an annoyed impatience. "Elliot, come on. You knew this was not serious." He shrugged, as if he were discussing a change in the weather, not destroying what I thought was the most important relationship of my life. "We are in our 20s. We are in college. We are supposed to explore. Love is not about ownership, you know." Explore. The word hit me like a physical blow. I had explored with him. I had shared everything with him. My first serious relationship. The first time I had ever truly let my guard down. Every vulnerable moment. Every piece of myself I had never given to anyone else. And he had been exploring too, apparently, just not exclusively with me. "You told me you loved me," I said, my voice breaking despite my desperate efforts to stay composed. I hated myself for the tears mixing with the rain on my cheeks. Hated that other students were probably watching this humiliating scene unfold. Hated that I was giving him the satisfaction of seeing how much he had hurt me. "I did love you, Elliot. I still care about you." Hunter's tone softened slightly, but it felt patronizing rather than genuine. "But we never talked about being exclusive. You are just being overly dramatic. It is an omega thing, I get it. But you need to chill." The lie was so blatant, so casually delivered, that it took my breath away. We had talked about it multiple times. He had been the one to bring up moving in together after graduation, to make plans that extended far beyond this campus. But now he was rewriting history as if those conversations had never happened, gaslighting me with the ease of someone who had done it 100 times before. He reached out to touch my shoulder, a gesture that once would have comforted me, but now made my skin crawl. The smell of his spiked pheromones, sharp, dismissive, and tainted, hit my nose. My omega instincts recoiled violently. "Do not touch me," I snapped, jerking away from his hand as if it were burning iron. I took a step backward, putting distance between us. The taste in my mouth was bitter and metallic. The taste of rejection, of betrayal, of 2 years of my life being casually discarded. But beneath the crushing weight of the heartbreak, there was something else, a sudden, sharp clarity. The constant anxiety about where I stood with him. The nagging feeling that I was always competing for his attention. All of it could finally stop. "You were right," I said, my voice suddenly steady, cutting through the sound of the rain. "This is not serious anymore." Glad you're finally being reasonable, he sighed, shoving his hands into his pockets. I did not say another word. I turned on my heel and walked away. I did not look back, even when I heard him call my name. I walked until my lungs burned, until I reached the faculty parking lot, far away from the crowds. It was not until I was standing between two parked cars that I allowed myself to fall apart. The tears came then, hot and angry and heartbroken, blurring the gray Manhattan skyline. I leaned against a cold brick wall, pulling my thin coat tighter around myself, shivering as the rain soaked through to my skin. I cried for the time I had wasted, for the trust that had been so carelessly shattered. Suddenly, the rain stopped falling on me. I looked up, blinking through my tears. A large, black umbrella was held over my head, shielding me from the downpour. I turned to see a man standing beside me. He was wearing a dark, perfectly tailored suit that screamed old money and quiet power. I could not see his face clearly under the shadow of the umbrella, only the sharp line of his jaw and the expensive watch on his wrist. He did not speak. He did not offer empty platitudes or ask if I was okay. He simply stood there in silence, holding the umbrella. And then, I smelled it. It was not the aggressive, suffocating scent of an alpha trying to assert dominance. It was a subtle, deep aroma, like cedarwood and rich black tea on a quiet winter morning. It was grounded, steady, and incredibly calming. The scent washed over me, instantly soothing my frayed nerves and hushing the panic screams of my omega instincts. It was the scent of absolute safety. Before I could find my voice to thank him, the man gently pressed the handle of the umbrella into my hand. He let go, stepping back into the rain. Without a single word, he walked away, his tall, broad-shouldered silhouette moving toward a sleek black car waiting at the curb. I stood there, gripping the warm handle of the umbrella, the scent of cedarwood lingering in the damp air around me. I watched the taillights of his car fade into the gray afternoon. I took a deep breath, the grounding aroma filling my lungs, clearing the last traces of Hunter's toxic presence from my mind. I wiped the tears from my face, my spine straightening. I was done crying over someone who did not value me. It was time to pack my bags. 2 months had passed since the rain-soaked afternoon when my life had fractured. Moving out of the apartment I shared with Hunter had been a swift, silent affair. I had done it while he was out at a fraternity party, leaving behind only the keys and a sense of profound exhaustion. I blocked his number, deleted my social media accounts, and threw myself entirely into my final year of the interior design program. I was surviving, but the ghost of the betrayal lingered. The constant, low-grade anxiety Hunter had instilled in me had left me hyper-vigilant, especially around other alphas. Their loud scents and aggressive posturing in lecture halls made my skin prickle with defensive unease. That was partly why I found myself standing in the foyer of the Obsidian, a highly exclusive, invite-only arts and tea club tucked away in a historic brownstone on the Upper East Side. My professor, recognizing my talent and perhaps sensing my need for a quiet sanctuary, had sponsored my junior membership. The atmosphere inside was a stark contrast to the chaotic energy of campus. It was hushed and elegant, smelling of polished mahogany, old paper, and expensive tea blends. Jazz played softly in the background. It was a place designed for discretion and quiet networking, exactly what I needed to prove to myself that I could move forward. I settled into a wingback chair in a secluded alcove of the reading room, pulling out my sketchbook. The task was to draft a concept for a modern residential library, but my pencil hovered aimlessly over the paper. The quiet, for once, felt too loud. "Is this seat taken?" The voice was a low, resonant baritone, smooth and unhurried. I flinched slightly, my head snapping up. Standing a few feet away, observing the empty leather armchair across from me was a man, the man. Even without the umbrella obscuring his face, I recognized him instantly. He looked to be in his late 30s, possessing a ruggedly handsome face with sharp, patrician features and piercing gray eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He wore a charcoal 3-piece suit that fit him with the kind of precision that could not be bought off a rack. But it was not his appearance that confirmed his identity. It was the scent. The subtle, grounding aroma of cedarwood and black tea brushed against my senses. It did not push or overwhelm. It simply existed, wrapping around the space with a calm, quiet authority. My omega instincts, usually so quick to sound the alarm these days, remained completely silent. In fact, my shoulders, which I had not realized were tense, imperceptibly dropped. "No," I managed to say, finding my voice. "It is free." He gave a slight polite nod. "Thank you." He sat down with a fluid grace, placing a thick, leather-bound book on the small table between us. He did not try to engage me in conversation. He simply opened his book and began to read. For the next hour, the only sounds were the soft turning of pages and the distant sound of teacups. It was a bizarre, yet incredibly comforting shared silence. I found myself actually able to focus, my pencil finally moving across the sketchbook, translating the quiet elegance of the room into lines and shadows. Every so often, I would steal a glance at him. He read with total concentration, a slight furrow between his brows. He exuded a kind of power that did not need to be announced, an alpha of the highest order, comfortable in his own skin, completely lacking the desperate need to prove his dominance that Hunter always displayed. When I finished my sketch, I closed the book a little too forcefully. The sound was loud in the quiet alcove. The man looked up, his gray eyes meeting mine. "A productive session, I hope?" he asked, his tone mild. "Yes, thank you. The environment here is helpful," I replied, suddenly feeling self-conscious. I gathered my things, preparing to leave. In my slight haste, the sketchbook slipped from my grasp, landing near his polished shoes. Before I could bend down, he had already retrieved it. He held it out to me, his gaze dropping briefly to the cover. "I apologize if I am overstepping," he said, his voice maintaining that respectful distance. "But I saw the crest on your bag. Columbia Architecture and Design." Yes, I took the sketchbook, our fingers brushing for a fraction of a second. His skin was warm. "Interior design, actually. My final year." A demanding field, he noted, leaning back slightly in his chair. "I have a deep appreciation for those who can organize space to reflect a specific state of mind. It requires a great deal of empathy." It was a surprisingly insightful comment, far removed from the superficial chatter I was used to. "It is about finding harmony," I found myself saying, "creating a place where someone does not have to pretend." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched the corners of his mouth. "Harmony. A rare commodity these days." He paused, his gray eyes studying me for a moment with a gentle intensity that made my breath catch, but not out of fear. "My name is Harrison, by the way." "Elliot," I replied, surprising myself with the steadiness of my own voice. "It is a pleasure to formally meet you." "Elliot," Harrison gestured slightly toward the small silver bell on the table, used to summon a waiter. "I was just about to order a fresh pot. I know we only just met, but would you care to join me for a cup of Earl Grey, assuming, of course, you do not have pressing engagements?" It was an invitation, not a command. He had left the door wide open for me to decline without any awkwardness. I thought about the empty apartment waiting for me, the quiet that sometimes morphed into loneliness. I looked at Harrison, at the respectful distance he maintained, and breathed in the faint, calming scent of cedarwood that seemed to push the chaos of the city far away. For the first time in months, I did not feel the urge to run. "I think," I said, sitting back down in my chair and setting my sketchbook on the table. "I would like that very much." Harrison's smile widened just a fraction, reaching his eyes. "Excellent choice." As the waiter poured the steaming tea, filling the space between us with the scent of bergamot, I realized that the heavy, suffocating knot of anxiety in my chest had finally begun to loosen. Winter descended on New York with an icy bite, but inside the obsidian, time seemed to slow to a comfortable, warming crawl. My chance encounter with Harrison had not been a single event. It had quietly, almost seamlessly, evolved into a routine. Every Saturday afternoon, I would arrive at the club, and he would be there in our usual alcove, reading a book or reviewing documents. There was no formal arrangement, no text messages coordinating our meetings, just an unspoken understanding that if one of us was there, the other was welcome to join. "Is the lighting in here sufficient for your drafting?" Elliot, Harrison asked one afternoon in early December. The sky outside the frosted windows was a heavy slate gray, threatening snow. He was looking up from a leather-bound portfolio, his gray eyes assessing the dim, atmospheric glow of the reading room lamps. He always did that, checked my comfort before settling into his own tasks. It was a stark contrast to Hunter, who used to complain loudly if I left a desk lamp on while he was trying to sleep off a hangover. "It is perfect, actually," I replied, shading a corner of a rendered floor plan. "The shadows help me visualize the depth of the space. But thank you for asking." Harrison nodded, seemingly satisfied, and returned to his reading. This was how our relationship blossomed, not with grand, sweeping gestures or passionate declarations, but with quiet, consistent respect. Harrison was a man of boundaries, and he never crossed mine without permission. "May I look at your sketch?" he would ask. "Would you prefer a different blend of tea today? Do you mind if we take a short walk in the park?" He gave me space to breathe, space to heal, and in that space, my defensive spikes slowly retracted. I learned small things about him. He was a senior partner at a private equity firm in Wall Street, which explained the bespoke suits and the aura of quiet authority. He preferred his tea without sugar, read history books for pleasure, and possessed a dry, understated sense of humor that often caught me off guard and left me genuinely laughing. But I also noticed the shadows. Sometime, his phone would vibrate in a specific, urgent pattern, and a subtle tension would tighten his jaw. He would step out to the hallway to take the call. His cedar would sense spiking with a cold, sharp edge of command before he re-entered the room, perfectly composed once again. He never discussed his family and I, respecting his privacy as he respected mine. Never asked. I had my own ghosts to deal with anyway. The design world at Columbia was small, and whispers of Hunter's recent exploits occasionally reached me. He was reportedly spiraling, failing classes, partying too hard, and loudly bragging to anyone who would listen about his untouchable status. He literally told Professor Vance not to bother failing him. My friend Maya had whispered in the studio earlier that week, rolling her eyes. Said his uncle is some Wall Street god who practically owns the board of trustees and funds his entire life. The guy is a walking red flag. Hearing about Hunter still sent a phantom jolt of anxiety through my chest, a reflex I hated. I had worked so hard to untangle my self-worth from his toxic grip. I did not want to think about his arrogant face, or the mythical, powerful uncle he used as a shield for his bad behavior. I pushed the memory away, focusing on the present. "You are frowning." Harrison's voice broke through my thoughts. I blinked, realizing I had been staring blankly at my sketchbook, my pencil hovering over a blotch of graphite. Outside, the first flakes of snow had begun to fall, sticking to the window panes. "Just a difficult design problem," I lied smoothly, offering a small smile. Harrison studied my face for a long moment. He was incredibly perceptive, and I often felt he could see right through my polite deflections. But true to his nature, he did not push. "Sometimes, stepping away from the problem is the best way to solve it," he suggested quietly. He closed his portfolio and checked his watch. "It is getting late, and the snow is picking up. Have you eaten dinner?" I shook my head. I was planning to just grab something at the campus cafeteria. "If you have no objections," Harrison said, his tone careful. "I know a quiet Italian place a few blocks from here, authentic, very low-key. I would be honored if you joined me." It was the first time he had invited me anywhere outside the safe confines of the club. A tiny flicker of panic, a remnant of my past, flared in my chest. Is this a date? What are his expectations? But then I inhaled. The scent of cedarwood and black tea washed over me, steady and calm. There was no pressure in his gaze, no hidden agenda in his posture. Just a man offering a meal. "I would like that," I said. The restaurant was exactly as he described, warm, dimly lit, and quiet. The food was incredible, but the conversation was better. We talked for hours, moving seamlessly from architecture to art history to our favorite childhood memories. For the first time in over 2 years, I did not feel the need to filter my words or monitor the other person's mood. When we finally left, the snow was falling heavily, blanketing the city streets in a muffling white. We walked side by side toward the subway station. The cold air was biting, and I shivered, pulling my coat tighter. Without a word, Harrison stopped. He unbuttoned his heavy cashmere overcoat and slipped it off his broad shoulders, draping it gently over mine. "Harrison, you do not have to," I started, the heavy, luxurious fabric instantly warming me. "I insist," he said softly, his hands lingering for a fraction of a second on my shoulders, adjusting the collar to shield my neck. I looked up at him. The streetlights caught the falling snow around us, framing his face. His scent surrounded me, completely rich, protective, and intensely personal. The cashmere held his warmth, seeping through my clothes and straight into my skin. My omega instincts did not recoil. They did not scream a warning. Instead, they settled into a deep, contented feeling that I felt in my very bones. The walls I had built so carefully around my heart did not just crack. They quietly, willingly surrendered. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the wind. He offered a small, genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "My pleasure, Elliot." As we continued walking, the distance between us felt remarkably smaller. I realized then that my healing was not just about forgetting the past. It was about allowing myself to feel safe enough to trust the present. And in the warmth of Harrison's coat, I felt unequivocally safe. The serenity I had cultivated over the winter months was shattered on a Tuesday afternoon in early March. I was alone in the senior design studio at Columbia, finalizing a physical model for my midterm critique. The room was quiet, smelling of balsa wood glue and fresh coffee. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was a message from Harrison asking about dinner tonight, mentioning he managed to get a reservation at Le Bernardin because he knew I had wanted to try their tasting menu. A genuine smile broke across my face. Our relationship had quietly deepened. We still had not explicitly defined what we were, but the lingering touches, the intense eye contact, and the sheer amount of time we spent together spoke louder than any label. I was typing a reply when the heavy studio door swung open with a loud noise. I jumped, my heart giving a painful lurch. Standing in the doorway, looking disheveled and frantic, was Hunter. My breath caught in my throat. I had not seen him in person since the day in the rain. He looked terrible. There were dark circles under his eyes. His clothes were wrinkled, and he reeked of stale alcohol and something sour, like desperation. But it was his pheromones that hit me the hardest. They were completely unregulated, flooding the small studio with a harsh, aggressive scent that immediately triggered a physical reaction in me. My stomach plummeted, and a wave of nausea washed over me. The old trauma, the ingrained instinct to submit to a dominant, angry alpha flared up, making my hands shake. "Elliot," he barked, stepping into the room and letting the door slam shut behind him. I stood up, instinctively placing the work table between us. "How did you get in here?" "This is a restricted studio." My voice trembled slightly, much to my own disgust. "I need to talk to you," he demanded, ignoring my question. He stalked forward, his scent growing thicker, more oppressive. "You have to help me." "I do not have to do anything for you, Hunter. Leave, or I am calling campus security." I reached for my phone, but he lunged across the table, grabbing my wrist with a bruising grip. "Do not do that," he snapped, his eyes wild. "My family cut me off, Elliot. They froze my accounts. My uncle found out about some stuff, and he completely lost his mind. I have nowhere to go. You have to let me crash at your place for a few days." I stared at him in disbelief. The sheer audacity was staggering. After what he had done, he still believed I was his safety net. "Let go of me," I said, trying to yank my arm away, but his grip was iron. "Come on, Elliot." His tone shifted abruptly, attempting a sleazy, manipulative sweetness that made my skin crawl. He deliberately spiked his pheromones, trying to force an omega submission response. "I know you still care. We were good together. I made a mistake, okay? But you are the only one who understands me." The concentrated blast of his alpha scent was sickening. It felt like hands wrapping around my throat, suffocating me. I felt lightheaded, panic rising in my chest. "I need to get away. I need to get out." I said, "Let go," I gasped, struggling harder. Then, the studio door opened again. It was not a violent crash this time. It was a smooth, controlled movement, but the effect was infinitely more terrifying. Suddenly, the oppressive, suffocating stench of Hunter's pheromones was entirely obliterated. It was as if all the oxygen in the room had been sucked out and replaced by something heavy, dense, and freezing cold. The scent of cedarwood, usually so warm and comforting to me, flooded the space, but now it was sharp as a blade and completely merciless. It was the pure, unfiltered presence of an apex predator. Hunter froze, his eyes widening in primal terror. He let go of my wrist instantly, stumbling backward as if he had been physically struck. I gasped for air, clutching my bruised wrist. I turned toward the door. Harrison stood there. He was wearing his usual impeccably tailored suit, his posture perfectly straight, but his face was devoid of the gentle warmth I had come to know. His gray eyes were dark, fathomless, and locked onto Hunter with a terrifying intensity. He did not yell. He did not need to. The sheer weight of his alpha aura was crushing. "Take another step toward him." Harrison's voice was dangerously low, a quiet rumble that seemed to vibrate in the floorboards. "And you will regret it for the rest of your remarkably short life." Hunter was trembling visibly. He opened his mouth to speak, to defend himself, perhaps to spout his usual arrogant rhetoric. But beneath Harrison's gaze he shrank. He could not even maintain eye contact. The bravado he had wielded so easily against me evaporated into pathetic whimpers under the pressure of a true, dominant alpha. Without a single word of defiance, Hunter scrambled backward, bumped into a drafting stool, and practically sprinted past Harrison out the door, fleeing as if his life depended on it. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood frozen behind the table, my heart hammering violently against my ribs. I was shaking, the adrenaline crash hitting me hard. The sudden, intense display of dominance from Harrison was terrifying, not because it was directed at me, but because it reminded me of the raw power alphas held, power that had been used to hurt me before. Harrison took a slow, deep breath. Almost instantly, the crushing weight in the room lifted. The razor-sharp edge of the cedarwood faded, softening back into the warm, grounding scent of black tea and wood smoke. He consciously, deliberately reined in his power. He did not rush toward me. He stayed by the door, keeping his distance, his hands open and visible at his sides. The terrifying predator was gone, replaced by the man who always asked for my permission. "Elliot," he said softly, his voice full of concern. "Are you hurt?" I looked down at my wrist, where red marks were beginning to form, then back up at him. The contrast between the violent intrusion of my past and the controlled, protective presence of Harrison was overwhelming. The walls did not just crack this time. They shattered. I did not want the work table between us anymore. I did not want the distance. I walked around the table, my steps slightly unsteady, and closed the gap between us. I did not stop until I was right in front of him. Harrison's eyes widened slightly in surprise, but he remained perfectly still, letting me initiate. With trembling hands, I reached out and gripped the lapels of his suit. I buried my face against his chest, inhaling deeply. The scent of cedarwood enveloped me, washing away the lingering taint of Hunter, soothing the panic, and grounding me back in reality. Harrison let out a shaky breath, slowly, carefully, as if I were made of spun glass. He wrapped his arms around me. He pulled me flush against his solid warmth, one hand resting on my lower back, the other gently stroking the back of my head. "I have you," he murmured against my hair, his voice thick with emotion. "You are safe. I promise you're safe." I closed my eyes, tears of sheer relief pricking the corners of my eyes. In his arms, surrounded by his scent, I finally knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that I was not just surviving anymore. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The incident in the studio shifted something fundamental between us. The unspoken boundary of just friends had been obliterated, replaced by a quiet, intense intimacy. We spent almost every evening together. I practically moved into his penthouse overlooking Central Park, finding more comfort in the quiet luxury of his space than in my own cramped apartment. Harrison was everything Hunter was not: attentive, steady, and entirely focused on me. Yet, as the weeks turned into a month, a subtle undercurrent of unease began to ripple beneath the calm surface of our relationship. It started with small things. One evening, while we were cooking dinner, or rather, while Harrison was expertly searing scallops and I was sitting on the kitchen island drinking wine, I asked a casual question. "You mentioned your family has an estate in the Hamptons. Do you spend a lot of time there in the summer?" Harrison's hand, holding the tongs, paused for a fraction of a second. It was a microscopic hesitation, but I saw it. The muscles in his jaw tightened. "Occasionally," he replied, his tone perfectly even, but lacking its usual warmth. "It is mostly used for large family gatherings. I prefer the quiet of the city." He smoothly steered the conversation back to my upcoming design presentation. I let it go. But the deflection did not go unnoticed. A few days later, I accidentally saw a notification pop up on his locked tablet resting on the coffee table. It was an email from a law firm regarding Hunter Hale and a trust fund liquidation. I froze. Hale. I knew Hunter's last name. It was not a common one, but it was not exceedingly rare either. I had always assumed Harrison's last name was something equally patrician, though he had only ever introduced himself as Harrison. In the insular world of the Obsidian, last names were often omitted in favor of discretion. My heart began to beat a little faster. It is a coincidence, I told myself, stepping away from the tablet. A business deal, a client. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and my omega instincts, hyper-attuned to deceit after years of gaslighting, began to hum with a low, anxious frequency. The breaking point arrived on a rainy Friday night. We were sitting on the plush rug in his living room, a fire crackling in the fireplace. Harrison was tracing lazy patterns on my arm, the scent of cedarwood heavy and relaxing in the air. I felt so safe, so entirely loved, that the words slipped out before I could censor them. "I love you." Harrison went perfectly still. His hands stopped moving. For a terrifying, agonizing moment, he did not say anything. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. When he finally looked at me, his gray eyes were filled with a complex storm of emotion. Deep affection, yes, but also a profound, agonizing guilt. "Elliot," he breathed, his voice rough. "I love you too. More than I ever thought possible." But the way he said it did not sound like a victory. It sounded like a confession. He pulled his hand away, sitting up and running a hand through his perfectly styled hair, ruining the neatness. He looked cornered. "Harrison, what is it?" I asked, sitting up as well, a cold dread pooling in my stomach. The warmth of the fire suddenly felt miles away. "You are hiding something from me. You have been for weeks." He closed his eyes, taking a deep, Shuddering breath, Elliot. There are things about my family, about my obligations, that are complicated. Complicated how? My voice was rising, the old panic clawing at my throat. Are you married? Do you have kids? Because if this is some kind of game. No, God, no. He interrupted, turning back to me instantly, horror flashing in his eyes. Nothing like that, never. Then what is it? I demanded. The scent in the room shifted. My own distress began to spike, turning the air sour. Harrison looked at me, seeing the panic, seeing the trauma he had worked so hard to soothe rising back to the surface. He looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff. He opened his mouth to speak, but he could not form the words. The fear of losing me was so evident on his face that it was heartbreaking. He was terrified that if he told me the truth, I would walk away. But his silence was worse than any truth. It felt exactly like the weeks leading up to Hunter's betrayal, the withheld information, the shifting gaze, the feeling that I was standing on shifting sand. I stood up, taking a step back from him. The physical distance felt necessary to breathe. I cannot do this, I said, my voice eerily calm, but my hands were shaking. Harrison stood up quickly, reaching for me. Elliot, please. No, I held up a hand, stopping him in his tracks. I looked him dead in the eye, channeling every ounce of self-respect I had fought so hard to rebuild. I gave 2 years of my life to a man who lied to me constantly. I trusted him unconditionally, and I lost everything: my dignity, my sense of self, my sanity. I promised myself I would never, ever be in a relationship built on secrets again. Harrison's face paled. He looked stricken. If you have a secret, I said, my voice cracking slightly, if you are hiding who you are from me, then please, Harrison, stop right here. Let me go now, before it destroys me again, because I will not survive it a second time. The air in the room felt suspended, heavy with the weight of my ultimatum. I was preparing to walk out the door, preparing to have my heart broken by the only man who had managed to put it back together. Harrison stared at me, the conflict in his eyes warring with the devastating realization that his silence was hurting me more than the truth ever could. He took a slow breath, his posture straightening, the alpha authority returning, but this time, it was laced with utter vulnerability. My full name, he said, his voice quiet but incredibly steady, is Harrison Hale. The name hit me like a physical blow. Hale. Hunter's last name. The email about the trust fund. The untouchable uncle. I took another step back, my mind racing, trying to put the puzzle pieces together, the picture forming being too horrifying to accept. Harrison did not move toward me. He stayed exactly where he was, offering no excuses, only the unvarnished truth. Next Saturday is my 40th birthday, he continued, holding my gaze with a desperate intensity. There is a mandatory family gathering at our estate in the Hamptons. Hunter will be there. The entire family will be there. He finally took a single step forward, extending his hand, not to grab me, but in a gesture of absolute surrender. I should have told you from the beginning. I was a coward because I was terrified you would hate me for the blood in my veins. But you are right. You deserve the truth. He paused, his voice dropping to a raw whisper. Come with me this weekend, Elliot. Stand by my side. And I promise you will have every answer you seek, and you will never have to fear anyone in that family ever again. I stood frozen, staring at the man I loved, who was also the patriarch of the family that had nearly destroyed me. The invitation was not just to a party. It was an invitation to face the darkest part of my past, with the most powerful man I knew acting as my shield. The drive to the Hamptons was suffocatingly quiet. I sat in the passenger seat of Harrison's luxury car, watching the towering glass of Manhattan dissolve into the sprawling, manicured green estates of Long Island. Harrison had not pushed for conversation. He kept one hand firmly on the steering wheel and the other resting gently over mine on the center console. His thumb stroked my knuckles in a slow, rhythmic pattern, his cedarwood scent deliberately dialed to a low, calming hum. He was giving me space to process, to steel myself for what was coming. Are you ready? He asked softly as we turned through massive wrought iron gates bearing the crest of the Hale family. The estate was terrifying in its grandeur, a sprawling limestone mansion surrounded by acres of private gardens and ocean views. I looked down at my suit of sharp, slate gray outfit that Harrison had gifted me for the occasion. It fit like armor. I took a deep breath, drawing on his steady presence. Yes, I said. And to my surprise, I meant it. We stepped out of the car, and immediately, a valet rushed forward. Harrison placed a hand on the small of my back, guiding me up the wide marble steps. The physical contact was a silent declaration. You are with me. The grand foyer was a sea of old money and polite, meaningless chatter. Women in couture gowns and men in bespoke tuxedos milled about, sipping champagne under crystal chandeliers. The moment Harrison entered, the atmosphere shifted. Conversations hushed slightly, heads turned. The respect bordering on fear that he commanded was palpable. He navigated the room with practiced ease, introducing me simply as Elliot to various business magnates and distant relatives. He never let go of my waist, his grip firm and possessive. I could feel the questioning stares, the unspoken curiosity about the young Omega standing beside the notoriously private, ruthless head of the Hale family. And then I saw him. Hunter was standing near the grand staircase, holding a Scotch glass, surrounded by a group of young, sycophantic cousins. He looked a little worse for wear since the studio incident, but he was still projecting that same arrogant, entitled aura, loudly holding court. So I told the dean, my uncle practically funded that new wing. He cannot touch me, Hunter was bragging, his voice carrying over the string quartet playing in the corner. Harrison's hand tightened minutely on my waist. I glanced up at him. His jaw was set in granite, his gray eyes fixed on his nephew with a look of absolute, icy disdain. Walk with me, Harrison murmured, his voice deadly calm. We cut a path straight through the crowd toward the staircase. As we approached, the group around Hunter noticed Harrison first. They immediately fell silent, scattering like frightened birds, leaving Hunter standing alone. Hunter turned a confident, practiced smile forming on his lips. Uncle Harrison, I. His voice died in his throat. His eyes darted from Harrison's face to the hand resting intimately on my waist and finally, up to my face. The color drained from Hunter's face so fast it was almost comical. His jaw literally dropped. The Scotch glass in his hand trembled, ice clinking against crystal. He looked as if he had seen a ghost or worse, the devil himself. Elliot, Hunter stammered, the arrogant alpha facade crumbling into pathetic confusion. He looked at Harrison, then back at me, his brain clearly short-circuiting. Uncle, what? What is he doing here? He is a gold digger. He is the one I told you about. Quiet. Harrison did not yell. The single word was spoken at a normal volume, but it cracked through the air like a whip. The sheer force of his alpha command forced Hunter to snap his mouth shut, his teeth clicking together. The surrounding guests had fallen completely silent, turning their attention to the unfolding scene. Harrison looked at Hunter not as a nephew, but as an insect he had just stepped on. Hunter, Harrison said, his voice echoing in the grand foyer, dripping with an elegant, brutal condescension. I believe you are confused. I am not interested in your juvenile fabrications. Harrison turned slightly, pulling me closer to his side, ensuring every single person in the room could see exactly where I stood. He looked down at me, his expression softening just for a fraction of a second, before returning his icy gaze to his nephew. Let me make this perfectly clear, so there is no further misunderstanding, Harrison announced, his voice carrying across the silent hall. Allow me to introduce my partner Elliot. Going forward, I expect you to address him with the utmost respect. Harrison paused, letting the silence stretch, before delivering the final fatal blow. In fact, Hunter, given our relationship, you may address him as your youngest uncle. A collective gasp rippled through the nearest guests. Hunter looked like he had been shot. He physically staggered back a step. The humiliation was absolute, total, and inescapable. The uncle he had used as a shield, the power he had constantly bragged about, was now standing before him, claiming the very person he had discarded and emotionally abused. Hunter opened his mouth, gasping like a fish out of water, but no words came out. His pheromones spiked in a pathetic display of panic and embarrassment, but Harrison casually crushed them beneath a wave of pure, dominant cedarwood, rendering Hunter entirely impotent in front of his entire family and social circle. It was not a screaming match. It was not a physical fight. It was an execution by social firing squad, orchestrated with flawless, chilling perfection. Now, Harrison said, dismissing Hunter completely, not even bothering to look at him anymore. If you will excuse us, Elliot and I need some fresh air. He guided me away from the frozen, humiliated figure of Hunter, leading me through the French doors and out into the expansive glass conservatory. As the doors closed behind us, cutting off the whispers and the classical music, the silence of the conservatory wrapped around us. The air was warm, smelling of orchids and damp earth. I let out a breath I did not realize I had been holding. My legs felt a little weak from the sheer adrenaline of what had just happened. I looked at Harrison. He had stopped walking. He was looking at me, the icy patriarch gone, leaving only the man who had held me together. I am sorry you had to endure that, he said quietly. But I needed him, and everyone else, to know that you're untouchable, that you're mine, and I am yours. I stepped closer to him. The fear and anxiety I had carried for 2 years had been entirely excised, surgically removed by the man standing in front of me. "You knew," I whispered, the realization finally slotting into place. "You knew who I was that day in the rain." Harrison reached out, gently cupping my cheek. His thumb brushed along my cheekbone. "I was in the car," he confessed, his voice low. "I was visiting the university for a board meeting. I saw what he did to you. I saw him break you. And then I saw you walk away, standing in the rain, refusing to shatter completely." He leaned in closer, his forehead resting against mine. "I did not approach you that day at the club by accident, Elliot. I sought you out. I wanted to apologize for my bloodline, but then I got to know you. And I realized I did not want to apologize for Hunter. I wanted to destroy him for hurting you. But more than that, I wanted to protect you." Tears pricked my eyes, but this time, they were tears of absolute relief. He had not lied. He had just been waiting for the right moment to wage war on my behalf. Harrison pulled back just enough to look into my eyes. The vulnerability in his gaze was breathtaking. "I am asking you officially to be my partner," he whispered. "With no secrets, no shadows. Only me." He paused, his gaze dropping to my lips. "May I kiss you?" I did not answer with words. I closed the distance, wrapping my arms around his neck, and pressed my lips to his. It was a kiss that tasted of cedarwood, of promises kept, and of a past finally, permanently buried. 2 years later, I woke up to the soft, golden light of a Sunday morning spilling across the hardwood floor of our penthouse overlooking Central Park. The bed beside me was empty, the sheets already cool, but the lingering scent of cedarwood told me he had not been gone long. I lay there for a moment, tangled in the fine linens, simply listening to the quiet hum of the city far below. There was no knot of anxiety in my stomach. No frantic checking of my phone to see if I had missed a text or if an argument was brewing. There was only a profound, unshakable stillness. I stretched, a genuine smile touching my lips as I finally pushed myself out of bed. The past 2 years had been nothing short of a revelation. After that explosive night in the Hamptons, the dust had settled quickly, mostly because Harrison had ensured it would. True to his word, he had shielded me entirely from the fallout. He had built a fortress of respect and security around us, allowing me the space to finally flourish. And flourish I did. Upon graduating from Columbia at the top of my class, I did not join a massive, soul-crushing corporate firm. Instead, with Harrison's quiet encouragement and absolutely no financial interference, as per my strict boundaries, I opened my own boutique interior design studio. My work focused on creating holistic, trauma-informed spaces. I designed homes meant to act as sanctuaries, utilizing natural light and specific spatial flow to promote calmness and security. My client list had grown entirely by word of mouth, a testament to the empathy I poured into every blueprint. As I padded barefoot down the hallway toward the kitchen, my phone buzzed on the entryway console. It was a message from Maya, my former classmate and now my lead project manager. She asked if I had seen the news, mentioning that the Hale family had officially cut Hunter's trust fund completely. Apparently, he got fired from an entry-level public relations job and was getting evicted from his studio apartment in Queens. "Karma is a beautiful thing," she had written. I stared at the glowing screen for a moment. 2.5 years ago, a message like that would have sent me into a spiral of conflicting emotions, pity, guilt, or maybe a vindictive thrill. But standing here now, surrounded by the life I had built, I realized I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sorrow, no triumph, just a vast, echoing indifference. I did not reply to the text. I simply swiped the notification away, locked the screen, and placed the phone face down. The sweetest, most devastating revenge was not orchestrated destruction or public humiliation, though Harrison had certainly delivered a masterclass in the latter. The truest revenge was moving on so completely that the person who broke you ceased to exist in your universe. It was choosing myself, choosing my peace, and allowing myself to be unapologetically happy. Hunter was a ghost from a past life, entirely irrelevant to the bright, beautiful present I now inhabited. I walked into the spacious, open-plan kitchen. Harrison was standing by the marble island, his back to me as he operated the coffee press. It was a rare sight. The ruthless, impeccably tailored titan of Wall Street dressed down in a pair of soft gray sweatpants and a plain white shirt. His broad shoulders were relaxed, the morning sunlight catching the silver threads that had begun to salt his dark hair. The rich, bitter aroma of dark roast coffee mingled perfectly with his natural alpha pheromones. It was a scent that had become synonymous with the concept of home, cedarwood black tea, and the quiet promise of safety. I crossed the room silently, stepping up behind him. Without hesitation, I wrapped my arms around his solid waist, pressing my cheek against the broad expanse of his back. Harrison did not startle. He simply let out a low, contented hum, his hands momentarily leaving the coffee press to cover my arms where they crossed his stomach. He leaned his weight back against me just a fraction, a silent acknowledgement of our shared space. "Good morning, my love." His deep baritone resonated in his chest, sending a warm vibration through me. "Morning," I murmured, closing my eyes and breathing him in. The absolute lack of tension between us was still, even after 2 years, something I marveled at. With my previous relationship, physical affection was always a negotiation, a performance, or a prelude to an argument. With Harrison, it was as natural and necessary as breathing. "I was letting you sleep," he said, turning around within the circle of my arms. He brought his hands up to cup my face, his thumbs gently brushing my cheekbones. His gray eyes, usually so sharp and calculating for the rest of the world, were terrifyingly soft as he looked at me. "You worked late finalizing the gallery project last night. You looked exhausted." "I feel perfectly rested now," I smiled, leaning into his touch. He bent down and pressed a lingering, tender kiss to my forehead, then my temple, and finally my lips. There was a slow, deliberate reverence in the way he touched me, a constant, physical reminder of the respect that formed the bedrock of our marriage. "Coffee," he offered, reaching for the mugs he had already set out. "Please." I hopped up onto one of the bar stools, watching him pour the steaming liquid. We drank in a comfortable, companionable silence, watching the city below us wake up. The sprawling green canopy of Central Park was vibrant under the morning sun. A year ago, I had thought that choosing Harrison, a man so much older, so established, so intimidating, was a risk. I had worried that trading fiery, chaotic passion for quiet stability meant I was somehow settling. I had been entirely wrong. I had not settled. I had elevated. I had learned that true passion is not a wildfire that burns your house down. It is the steady, warm hearth that sustains you through the coldest winters. It does not scream and demand attention, it listens. It protects. It asks for permission. I looked at my alpha, my husband, my partner in every sense of the word, and felt a profound sense of completeness. I had walked away from chaos and stepped into a cedar-scented sunrise, finding a love that did not require me to shrink, but rather gave me the whole sky to grow. "What are you thinking about so intensely?" Harrison asked, noticing my gaze. He set his mug down, giving me his full, undivided attention. I reached across the cool marble counter, lacing my fingers through his warm ones. "Just thinking about how lucky I am," I said honestly, holding his gaze, "and how much I love this life with you." Harrison's smile was small, private, and entirely mine. He brought my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to the silver wedding band on my finger. "The luck," he murmured, his voice filled with a quiet, absolute certainty, "has always been entirely mine."